So if someone is listening and they want to write, and I ask a lot of writers this because I'm always curious, what is your writing routine to get these books pumped out? Because it's not a joke to write a book. It's a lot of work. Do you have like a routine that you do?
I do now. I used to not at all. When I wrote that book, when I wrote Speech Therapy, and I actually wrote 2 different versions of that. I've written 7 books before that. I wrote very chaotically. I kind of wrote whenever I had the free time because I was traveling a lot, and I'd write on planes or write at night. And it doesn't work for me anymore because the work I'm trying to do now, I feel is more meaningful and I feel it's deeper. And also being a father and having a household with 2 Great Danes and 2 cats, like I have to have a routine now. So I used to think routine made people boring. And as I get older, I realize routine is like the answer to everything. Routine is really what makes life bearable, but it also makes you successful. And so I try to wake up now around 5. My girlfriend's son get up around 7:30 or 8. So if I get up at 5, I have good 2.5, 3 hours of quiet time. I leave all the lights off. I make my coffee. And before I take that first sip of coffee, I try to be behind my laptop. And I'll write for 2.5, 3 hours. And a lot of it'll be shit that the next day I'll look at and I'll delete. And a lot of writers go through that where like most of what you write, you don't like, but I'm getting it done. And I know you guys had Stephen Pressfield on here, and that's reading his book, The War of Art, really changed the way I approached my own creativity because I had never had this idea of resistance. I just always thought I was lazy, and I had a lot of negative self-talk where I would just be like, oh, you're so fucking lazy. And I would military speak myself into working. I would just talk down on myself until I started getting shit done. But the way, he talks about in that book, just doing like the small things. And I've tried it for the first time. And the amount of work I can get done now by just doing a little bit every day is just, I used to go through these manic, like I'd write every day for 7 days straight. And I'd write like 10 hours a day and I'd go crazy with it. And it's not nearly as productive as just doing 2 or 3 hours every day.
What I love about talking to him and hearing from guys like yourself is what's so inspiring about Stephen is that, I mean, if you heard that episode, like he didn't really have success until he was in his 50s. I mean, he, and then since then it's like what, 27 or 30, something crazy in the amount of output of books he's done. Yeah. But it took like 50 years of him like doing that work to get there. I think so many of us young people, we think like we need to have it right now. And if we don't, we're a failure. And so we stop putting in the repetitions. Yeah. And having talking to a guy like him is super helpful for us because you're like, oh shit, like we're just getting started, right? Like we can work another 20 something years and basically get to where he was, right? Like that, it took him basically 5 decades to build that writing career.
I still don't think I've written my first real book.
And it's a healthy way to look at it.
I told my agent that I think the book I'm working on now is my first real book. I think the 7 books up to this point were kind of practice. And that's probably where I get the hardest on myself is like you're saying, I look back and go, I'm 36. If I had started writing books at 23, I'd have like 14 done by now. And like, I'll get down on myself for not being more productive. But a lot of what I write about, I mean, a lot of writers, they use like other people's lives as inspiration. Like they'll find, like an old historical story and they'll twist it into something relevant, which is what I did for that fucking history book, but I did it in a very brash way. That bores me now. I can't do that anymore. I can only write about things from my own life because I feel like I get something out of writing it, almost like a therapy session with myself. And so the work I'm doing now, I couldn't have written 10 years ago. I couldn't have written 5 years ago. I couldn't have even written it 2 years ago. And that helps me not feel so pressured to put out more books because I remind myself, well, shit, this book, I had to go through these experiences to write this book. And this is a book I'm supposed to be writing right now. So that's kind of how I look at my work now.
Yeah, every once in a blue moon, we get a couple critiques on this show. Once in a blue moon, not very often.
Yeah, right.
But like some of it is, I used to, they've changed or it's gotten different. You're like this. I'm like, guys, we've been doing this now.
That's the fucking point.
That's the point, right?
Yeah, but who wants it to be the same all the time? No, I can't with the same.
Here's the thing. We also, to your point, we don't have the ability to do a lot of the stuff we did when we were, 600 episodes ago and, 5-7 years younger, right? Like our lives change as we've developed in this show, like our perspective changed. We become parents, we've been married, like there's things happen in life. And I think it's a beautiful process for any kind of creative because you're going to start with a certain set of audience or fan base. And over time, you're going to keep some and you're going to lose some as you evolve. But to me, the most boring thing would be to stay the same and predictable, right?
If you don't look back on your previous work as a creative and cringe a little bit, then there's something wrong, I think. if you can look back on your work from 5 years ago and not want to change anything about it, you haven't changed as a person. Like I leave all of my old tweets and I leave all like my first few quote me books, which are like snippy little quotes. I leave a lot of stuff out there because I think it shows how much I've evolved. And I'll read some of it, or I'll go to like a book signing and people will bring copies of my old books and I'll flip through it and I'll see some of the stuff I wrote and I'll be like, oh my God, like that dude didn't know what the fuck he was talking about.
Our first episode still exists. It is painful to
and
look
I
at.
like having that out there. I really do. I like having it as to look back on and just feel better about what I'm doing now.